Okay, back to the malach of writing. So yesterday, the last thing we were learning about combination locks. That you're allowed to use combination locks because you're not writing anything, the letters are just there, you're just putting it in the right place. Okay, now, because it's biblically forbidden to write on Shabbos, so the Chachamim, like everything else, made certain gzeiros, decrees that you shouldn't come to do something that would cause writing. So basically, the general rule is anything that a person does, which normally is done through writing, you wouldn't be allowed to do on Shabbos. Like for instance, going from an easier statement, any game that you normally keep score, writing, you wouldn't be allowed to play on Shabbos. So like Scrabble, you wouldn't be allowed to play on Shabbos because when you keep Scrabble, you keep score. In addition, we learned that if you have the deluxe set that goes into grooves, then also you're not allowed to because of writing. Any game that you do, or for instance, the Chacham said you can't do buying or selling. Why? Because when you buy or sell, you normally write down information and things. So before we get to there, one of the things the Chacham said you're not allowed to do on Shabbos is borrow objects. Or borrow, well, money you can't anyway on Shabbos. But for instance, the Gemara it's interesting. In Hebrew, there's a difference between halveini no, lend me, or shaleni no, hashileni, correct Hebrew grammar. Hashileni, both in English, they're both defined to mean lend me. But halva, loan, usually represents long term. Borrowing something like an object, you say, on Shabbos you ran out of challah, so you go to your neighbor, can I borrow some challah from you? Okay, that's short term. But if you say the word lend me or can I borrow, that's forbidden on Shabbos to do. Why? Because normal loans, you write it down. If I lend you money, I'm going to write it down. I shouldn't forget, and you should know that. So for instance, what should a person do if he needs something on Shabbos, let's say, and he needs to go to a neighbor to get it? He shouldn't say, lend me, whatever it is. He should basically say, please give it to me, and I'll return it to you. So now you're talking an expression of giving. So giving is like a gift. So then you're not going to write it down, because I give you a gift, I'm not going to write it down, I gave you a gift. I mean, what's the purpose of it? So that's one way of doing it. And again, because people say lend me, so again, some poskim today say that, and people don't write down loans unless if it's money. But if I borrow an object from you, people usually don't write it down. So there are poskim that want to say that today, because when you borrow objects, you usually don't write it down, unless it's a precious object. So they say, you could even say, lend me challah, lend me a matzah, lend me a dozen eggs, whatever person, what?
But is the halacha, is the law really about the act, or about what you call the act?
Oh, so a lot of it in halacha represents what you call it. Because a loan is forbidden on Shabbos, because besides money, I mean, loan by definition means I'm going to pay it back, and I'm expecting you to pay it back. So what do people do when you use the word loan? They'll write it down. That's why I'm saying in halacha there's a difference in Hebrew between halveini no, which means lend me, which refers to money, or hashileni no represents like objects. So then, you'll give me a dozen eggs. You're not going to take me to court if I don't give you back the dozen eggs, So you could say, you know what, I'll return it to you. You shouldn't say I'll repay it. You could say I'll give it back to you. Again, it's semantics, but language in halacha is very important. If you say it this way, you're allowed to. If you say this, what? Yeah.
How about you return it and you have to pay something extra? How you call that one?
Interest. It's called interest.
Interest.
But
As a halacha or
yeah, but now we're learning lesson about Shabbos. Not only that, if you owe somebody something, you're not allowed to pay it back on Shabbos, because again, what's the problem? If he wrote it down that you owe him the thing, so now you're giving it back, he'll erase it, which is also forbidden to do on Shabbos. So what do you need to do? So he says like this: you can return it if number one, if he needs it for Shabbos. If he doesn't need it for Shabbos, he can't pay it back on Shabbos. And he shouldn't say, I'm repaying, listen to this. He shouldn't say, I'm repaying you. He says, I'm returning your item. You don't return a loan, you pay a loan. An object that I borrow from you, then I don't repay you, I return it. That's the difference. It's semantics, granted, but in halacha, the semantics is a difference if it's a loan or not a loan. If it's something that you're going to write down or something that you don't write down. But,
Same way, can I borrow dollars from your locker? That's normal, Shabbat.
yeah, so again, today, because again, poskim write, contemporary poskim write, that because if I say to you, on Shabbos you say, or if you're a yeshiva bacher, can you borrow me?
Can I borrow you sit there and going into
No,
the
the yeshiva bachim say, can you borrow me something? Instead of, can you lend me something?
translating to Yiddish.
Yeah, translating to Yiddish. So if a guy says, can you lend me your talis from the locker, that's an object. It's not that he's going to write it down on a piece of paper that you borrowed my talis. It's not going to be. That's allowed. Or the same thing as Chachamim said, you're not allowed to transfer ownership on Shabbos. And this is a very interesting din. Transferring ownership on Shabbos means buying or selling. It could even be in a way of you're making something free for all. Hefker. So for instance, the question is, we'll get to soon because it's a din that this year about Erev Pesach falls out on Shabbos, Erev Pesach, so everything you do a day earlier. But nullification of Chametz, you do Erev Pesach. So now the question is, can I nullify Chametz Erev Pesach because I'm making it ownerless? I'm making it, is that called, so that you're allowed to because for the sake of a mitzvah you're allowed to. Okay, like for instance, what happens if somebody needs something for Shabbos? You need something, but now it's going from your possession to my possession. So it could be done in a number of ways. You can't say any method of payment. You could say like this. Not only that, you can't even say, give me a pound of nuts. You could say, give me nuts. Give me some nuts. Because once you say, or you say, give me $5 worth of candy. Okay? You're not allowed to say, give me $5 worth of candy, because that's business language. What you could say, or you can't say, please give me a pound of money. The proper way of doing it is, can you please give me 10 apples, or 2 bunches of grapes? So you're not mentioning value or weight. When you sell things, usually, you're mentioning value of it, and you mention the weight. That's the way things are sold. So any mention of value or weight would be called a language of buying and selling, which would be forbidden on Shabbos. I'll take it even a step further. There's something called monopoly. Yeah?
Yeah, like the game.
Oh, good. There's a game called Monopoly. So now the question is, can people play Monopoly on Shabbos? Now the question is, the game of Monopoly is you're buying and selling. It's a business game. That's what you're doing. Yeah, granted it's fake money. Granted. Yeah, but you're still buying and selling. You're collecting rent.
You don't buy anything tangible.
What are you talking? Yeah, it's tangible in the game. So most opinions, by the way, today it's a whole different story. Today they have the electronic monopoly. It's a whole different world. That's for sure not allowed. But even a game like Monopoly, 95% of the poskim right, you're not allowed to play Monopoly on Shabbos because it's still called buying and selling. In the game you're talking, I'm buying this property, I'm renting this property.
So it's make believe.
So what?
How about risk?
It's make...
How about risk?
I used to
Okay,
play
listen.
every Shabbos with Rabbi Mentz.
Okay, well, you'll ask me the names next time you bring the games for homework. You bring all the games in and we'll analyze the games and we'll figure it out. Well, one second. So, yes, it's fake money, but it's actual buying and selling with that type of money.
But you're not actually buying and selling.
Yes, you are. In the game, you're buying and selling. It's
So you're buying-
after the game's over. But while you're in the game, you're actually buying and selling
You're not
property.
actually buying and selling the property in New Jersey.
It doesn't matter. That little house that you're selling, the fake little,
Yeah.
you're buying that. You're buying that piece, huh?
The fact that you're using currency, even though it's fake, like,
Because you're using currency, and the language is buying and selling. It's not a real house in Park Place or Rodeo Drive, but it's still a little house, a little thing.
In reality, Rabbi, in reality, you don't really buy anything tangible, you don't sell anything. It's just the imagination. It's up
But
to
you're
you.
selling an object. There's a little house that you put on it. You
That's
own
not
it.
an object, that's a piece of paper.
No, so what? You're buying and selling. It's still buying and selling. If you think about it, maybe it's make-believe buying and selling, but in the game, it's real.
You know what you're doing? Taking everything else you say with a grain of salt. Because it's so far-fetched, what you're suggesting.
That's what I'm saying. Halacha says it's not far-fetched. Because to give the severity of the thing, okay? You have a cliff. Or you have a manhole in the street. Yeah, the workers are opening up the thing and they go down there. Now, would it be okay for the government not to put any barriers around and just let people go and tell them don't fall in?
Yes.
That's how they do it.
What?
There is a real and present danger.
Okay. Now, sins are a real spiritual danger which is worse than physical death. Because the whole life of a person is 120 years. So, 1 minute, you weren't at one time, and another time in 120 years, you're not going to be. So, physical life is not real. But spiritual life of a neshama, that's real, that's eternity.
But if I draw...
So if you sin, if you do an aveda, that is called spiritual suicide. Shh. Spiritual suicide. That's worse, listen to me, you have to go. That's worse than physical death. Because it's eternal. Now, so therefore the Torah instructed the Chachamim, it's a pasuk in Chumash, V'shamros mishmarti, that the rabbis have an obligation, not only a right, an obligation to create fences that people, God forbid, shouldn't fall off the cliff, the spiritual cliff, or fall, God forbid, into a physical manhole.
But using your analogy, if I draw a black circle on the ground that looks like a manhole cover, should I still put a fence around it so nobody falls in? There's
No,
nothing to fall into.
because that's not a
It's
danger.
not real.
But that's not a
That's
danger.
what he's saying.
No, but the
It's
buying
not a
and
real
selling.
danger.
But buying and selling, first of all, again, this is all rabbinic prohibitions.
Yes.
A circle on the ground, a black, shh, I know you're a lawyer, take it easy. So I'm also a lawyer. You make a black circle around the ground,
People do that, they're painting, it looks like real thing.
okay. And those people are going to soon put a fence around that black hole that they drew. So, one sec. So then, what?
I'm saying classic cartoons of Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner, they would paint something that looks so real, and you go and hit it or fall into it or whatever.
Let me ask you a different question. It's getting late. Is this world real, or maybe it's fake?
That's real.
Depending on your definition of real.
Real.
What's your
Tangible,
definition of real?
that's
From what we can gather,
You're
it's
saying basically it's commerce, even though, like, the fact that we're doing commerce in every day, who says that that's the dollars worth of money versus the
It's not the real money, okay? But it's still money in the realm of monopoly. In the world of monopoly, it is a money and you're buying and selling. So it's still called buying and selling. Yes, it's not buying a house in Beverly Hills or in wherever it is, but it's buying and selling.
That's because we don't want to compromise.
Chassidus asks the question, is the world real? Maybe it's fake. Maybe Hashem is such a good artist that he makes the world look so real. You ever go in IMAX, they have that thing, the movies around the thing.
Las Vegas?
They're in LA also.
Where?
That you go in, you stand in the room, and there's this thing, it looks so real you could swear that there's horses and whatever it is, yeah? Okay, so Chassidus asks the question, shh, Mati, maybe Hashem is such a great artist. In fact, it's how we say it right before Ein Kelokeinu. It's a part, Ein Tzur Kelokeinu. Simply means there's no rock like Hashem. But the Medrash says it means Ein Tzayar Kelokeinu. There's no artist like God. So Chassidus asks the question, maybe the world is not real. Maybe it's fake. Maybe it's fake. So Chassidus brings two proofs in Torah that the world is real. Number one, Torah is emes. Torah says, Bereshit bara Elokim, that God created the world. If Torah's emes says Hashem created the world, then there's a real world. Then they bring a proof from Mishnah Sanhedrin. The Mishnah speaks about witchcraft. You know, that machshef, kishuf, black magic. So over there the Mishnah says like this. Ha'isa ma'isa, if you actually do actual witchcraft, then it's capital punishment. Ha'eche zeinayin, if you make it only an illusion, then you don't get killed. So Chassidus says, if the whole world is an illusion anyway, what's the difference between real witchcraft and fake witchcraft if the whole world anyway is fake? Anyway, to be continued.